It's been too long, that's why.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 3 of the Unchained Vodcast, Episode 27. We've now almost up to 30 episodes of this particular vodcast. How are y'all doing today?
Getting cold, but otherwise okay.
It is a little frosty here. We've been threatened with snow, and everyone has crapped their pants and freaked out. And I assure you, probably Walmart is out of stock of water right now because of the threat of 1 inch of snow.
Yeah, no. For us, it was more the frozen sidewalks and the really, really deep cold. When it's always kind of humid in the air and it's really cold, it's really shitty.
There's always that one picture that goes around on the internet this time of year that explains where I live the best, and it's the one of a frozen car that says, "This is why I love living in California," because the entire world is going through this ice age. I mean, California is like 60, 70 degrees year-round.
Yeah, we've had the supposed cold front and everything coming down into central Alabama, and I've seen reports that other cities are snowing a little bit, but it has not touched us. It has apparently moved around us, and it is not coming here.
It's just avoiding you.
Which is I guess is okay considering it's Saturday, and if it was going to snow, I would prefer that it waited until Monday when I have to work. Because when it snows here, everything closes. And I wouldn't have to go to work. So
yeah, no, I can't complain. I moved here. I knew what I was getting myself into. I moved from the southeast of France to the UK. I can't complain.
All right, well, everybody in chat, let us know how you're doing. Happy New Year, everybody, both watching video and in chat. Happy New Year to CSE and all their people working, and hope they had a good break. And I've seen some of the stuff they've been working on, so certainly they've gotten back into the swing of things by now. Mark in chat, so hopefully you're a little more well rested and not as harassed after having a little bit of a break.
Mark binged on some Robotech, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I play way too many video games. I'd planned to record some videos about Camelot Unchained during the break, and I didn't do it because I played too many video games. So, anyway, today, for episode 27, and to start off this new season, we are going to talk about starter cities, specifically making starter cities great again. I know, everyone hates me right now.
Starter cities.
What again? Constantly.
But what we want to talk about today is starter cities and how they can be active. We've kind of touched upon this subject, especially in the last couple episodes we had in season 2. And you know, CSE has kind of suggested that what they want to do is make these starter cities, which are essentially the only safe zones in the game, populated, active throughout the game, which, you know, for anybody, obviously, that has played MMOs, that's like, starter cities with people in it? That doesn't happen.
That's like
preposterous.
The first 15 levels?
How dare they?
Yeah, maybe. How dare you suggest that?
Even if that.
So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at, first, what things in Camelot Unchained might already gear the MMO towards having better and more active starter cities. 2, what things we think CSE could specifically do to foster that. What choices could they possibly make? And 3, what things would we really not want them to do in order to try to foster this capital city activity? So the first thing I want to say is to list what I see as the 3 main issues with starter cities and why they are so dead in most MMOs. And yes, Arcane, I do have a bit of a thing for starter cities. I'm a role player, actually, so I kind of do. I usually
Like the
want
Star
to
Cities.
stay in them a lot, and they're always barren and empty. So that's the first thing. Most starter cities are barren. They just empty because most MMOs have leveling areas, in-game content, new zones that people branch out into that tends to draw the population away from them. They also tend to not have any purpose in most games. Some games try to force people there through auction houses, but for the most part, you can usually either get to the auction house from some other location or some other method, or you can do crafting anywhere you want to. There's not really a reason to go back necessarily. And in some games, they try to force you to go back by, say you've got to train abilities and now you have to go back to the starter city just to learn your ability. And unfortunately, that doesn't create any actual activity in the starter city because all it does is really force you to walk back, get it, and then you turn around and immediately leave, and you're just kind of pissed off that you had to walk back for
pretty
that.
much.
So, first question, of course, for y'all and for chat. What specific things that we already know about Camelot Unchained do you think will help to foster a more active starter city in the Three Realms?
I'm going to let Kriss answer this because this is entirely his thing.
Well, not just the crafting. The fact that it's a safe zone. And the fact that the crafting being so developed, there's going to be people who are not really interested in PvP. And they will want to stay in the safe zone. So that's one of the things that I think will keep the star cities or the star in CU. It's more the starter island more than just the city really, that we want to keep active.
Yeah, it does give a safer central place for like the crafting. I mean, if somebody wants to trade in safety, it's going to be kind of inconvenient to go back to the starter city to do that for some people, but you don't have to worry about people ganking you while you're trying to get resources or whatever.
That and the fact that some of the, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure, but some of the Kickstarter pledges had the option to have an inn in the safe zone. I think the inns were only in the starter cities or close by. But I think you could own an inn in the safe zone in the starter cities with some of the packages.
Arcane just brought up one of the points I was going to bring up. We don't know how resurrection works in the game exactly, but depending on how they arranged it, it's not unthinkable that if you don't have another place to res closer when you die, you may have to respawn back at the safe zone, which then you may decide not to walk back, or you may decide to take care of some things before you walk back. So that can be something that can draw you there occasionally. Of course, it can also be a thing where, well, if you get forced there, you may be kind of annoyed and you may leave immediately. But some people may choose not to.
Circling around to other reasons, some MMOs do, I won't say a poor job in funneling, but they leave too many open holes for people to not return to a starter city. Sometimes there are too many starter cities. There are multiple for
each race
factions. And so they're kind of split rather than combined into one.
That's true.
And even if there was the one with the implementation of any sort of automated auction system, they're kind of just all in that area. That would be like the main reason. So we know that that's not in the game, which leaves everyone having to talk to each other. So if you're trying to create any sort of funnels, not necessarily too forcibly, but just, emphasizing, it would be through the chat system, making people have to be social in some sort of trade chat system that really only functions properly, at least in the main city.
Yeah, as Imfict said, there's going back to the economy, with no auction house, people have to trade somewhere. Now, we had a recent episode talking about that and talking about how, similar to EVE Online, you could possibly have markets in different towns and stuff spread all over.
The marketplaces,
which are more convenient, but they do have the problem of being dangerous, and you might lose or lose things or get killed on your way out there. Whereas the safe zone is kind of be a safer place to trade, and so for some things at least, I think that's something that will definitely be done. Another thing, as Mark with a C just said, it is difficult to compare PvE games with CU. And on the PvE aspect of things, one advantage Camelot Unchained definitely has is that it doesn't have the leveling areas. They're not going to hit in-game and then suddenly have to create a new zone with 10 more levels that you can gain and grind, and a new
with a starter city
and its own starter city, because it's so far away that you have to have a hub there for people to get together and get quests and everything. Which PvE games, that's mainly one of the big draws, is they have to make all these expansion areas, and then those become barren as someone moves on to the next one and then the next one. WoW has so many starter city, so many central hub cities. I wasn't going to mention
it, but
that are completely just dead. I think that's probably going to be the single biggest aspect of CU for funneling people back to the starter city, is the fact that they don't have to create these really big other zones that people just live in all the time.
I see there at most really being maybe two, the main one that, when all the islands are separated, and then if by chance Camelot is the end game of things, that could potentially be a second one for all factions.
I can see another option would be like a player-made safe city. If the players are pushed out far enough and the players of one realm build a big enough city that it is relatively secure, but it's still in a PvP zone. But
let's just
safe.
Say it is in the plans.
It's in Kriss's plans.
Yes, it is. It definitely is.
I've always said it. People will try to.
I've always said it, so it's not a secret.
Yeah. But I think that's the only thing that would really run a significant risk of draining people from the starter city, is if players can build another really big city of themselves. As Mark just said, he would consider that a win for them, and I would too. I mean, that's really like the fruition of Cube and the just emergent dynamic gameplay of the players, is for them to be able to come together and coordinate enough to build that sort of a structure.
Manage it, maintain it, keep it safe, fight for it. Yeah, that's the whole point of the game.
But as Mark says, that there will, even with a big player-made city, there is still a risk versus reward, because the city, as defensible as it can be, it is still, eventually, it might fall and get taken over.
And when that happens, we have that one hub to go back to.
Yeah, exactly. So
and try again.
It's still going to be relevant because it's really the only completely safe zone.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing though. If people, first of all, it's kind of a complicated mixture for them to build that right balance in the game. For players to be able to build a huge dedicated city of their own that's worth the investment, but if they do get that, if they do get that right, which I hope they do, because that'll be huge for the game. The starter cities have to have some things of their own to still pull people back into them on a continual basis. And so I guess that is actually a really good segue into the next portion of the discussion.
One thing before you segue on that Arcane Cluster touched on also, that the crafters, yes, will have to store their items in not necessarily a warehouse, but chests that will be lootable in the game. If you're not in the safe zone, if you're not in the safe city, and your house, your castle, whatever is taken over, they can pillage your stash. So the only safe place to store your valuables if you're willing to make the trip from the front lines or wherever you gather them all the way back to the safe city, that's the only place where you'll be 100% safe.
Right.
That your high-end materials that you spent hours refining, shaping, and whatever for your epic weapon are gonna be safe.
Yeah. And for other things to draw people back into the starter zone. The next question is, again, for chat and for the two of you, what choices do you think CSE could make, besides the things we already know? What choices could they possibly make about different aspects of the game that might, what features and methods of doing things might bring people more regularly back into the starter city, so that if players do build a massive, magnificent city in the center area, we'll still encourage people to spend some time in the starter city?
I'm gonna step on Brent's side of the argument there, but I'd say I've talked about it on the forums as well. It's since we won't have in faction, in realm fighting, an arena where people can duel to Theorycraft. You can go and spectate on around it. I draw that idea from EverQuest, where you had that. You had an arena in the star cities, for example, in Freeport, where you step into the sand and you're automatically flagged for a PvP. So you can actually test your builds and test with as customizable as we will have abilities. You will need to test those. And the easiest way to test them before bringing them to battle is duel. So if you don't have duel, but you have arenas with people spectating, you can actually real-time theorycraft in the game with other people on the best way to build your abilities. And that's a good way to draw high-level or experienced players back into the town and give some life to the chat and to the town itself.
Taking a different route from that, I fully agree, and I love that. I love dueling and arena stuff.
I know.
I intend to play a scout. There have been a lot of talks about how the scout can help update a map of some sort owned by the faction that the king, or helps update the king, and the king updates the map, whatever. However that's going to work, if that map is a centrally located thing, rather than hitting the M button to bring it up. Maybe you have your own generic one, but there's one for your faction that has more details on what's going on in the world around you, as far as how the scope of all the battles out there will be. That can at least start people there, and then allow them to go out to those places. They're seeing all the details they need to figure out where they want to go, what's going on, what areas are being attacked or not attacked, and things of that nature.
That's true. I mean, that would, be really good for people who are starting out or aren't in guilds and stuff and need to know where the battles are. But it wouldn't give people constant real-time information when they're out running around. Instead, all the scouts could kind of report there, but then it also pings on people's maps further out, in some fashion, maybe a little bit later on. But somebody could be there in that central area with maybe a really big map too, that's kind of really visible, really cool looking. That could also be cool for role players as well. They could go in there to the big mystical realm map and be like, "Oh, this is cool," and do they're planning battles or something. I don't know. One thing that Swazi just said, that maybe you could access Cube from the main city instead of logging in through the patcher. Maybe there would be a way to log in. And on the one hand, I'm like, that would be kind of annoying.
I do think it's going to be integrated into the game.
Yeah, on the one hand, it would be kind of annoying to have to log into the game and then go somewhere to log into Cube.
No, because to build inside the game, Cube will be accessible through the game, like it is right now, actually. You don't have to log out to build into the game. You might have access to Cube to port your blueprints, created blueprints in Cube, and then importing them in the game. That would be an idea, but
I think that's what he's talking about, building the blueprint.
To branch out on what Brand said, what could be fun for scouts is that the scouts map could update automatically for your group when you're in a group, or you can set it maybe to guild. But to update for realm-wide, you would have to bring the information to the library.
Something like that.
And having that put onto the records for the realm, and then it updates the whole... and to update your whole map, you will have to go to the library either to update your map.
Well, we did talk about that in the scouting episode, and I do still think that if you have to go back to the starter city, even as a scout, that's going to be too onerous. There has to be a way to maybe you have to go to another keep, but not the central city to report. Because, I mean, I can just imagine having to walk from 3 islands out all the way back to the starter city every time you want to report data, and your data is going to be so old by the time you get there that it's not going to be very useful.
The concept that I'm thinking of is more of like, it's the end of the day, we're just getting home from work, whatever, we're logging in for the first time in the day, what's going on? You have a guild or you have friends who can surely help you and explain, hey, we're all over here, come join us. But even if you have that, or if you don't have that, you can see this huge map. And
the real-time tactical
this is
mapping.
what's going on,
It's really
command center.
It's really kind of a compromise between the old like EverQuest method, where you have no map at all, versus having a world map, but you don't necessarily have a fully detailed one, except the fully detailed one is in the starter city. So someone can who is just logging into the game, wants to see what's going on, they can go in there and be like, oh, they're out here, and then they can head out there. Or even a guild that's big enough and really wants that kind of information can have somebody sitting in there with with that big map, and they just sit there staring at the map going, oh, someone just pinged in this info right here, and they'll get it like 5 seconds faster.
To just do that.
That poor person. But hey, maybe they're eating a sandwich. I don't know. They could be sitting there having dinner going, I'm watching the map for you.
Yeah. If the systems work, maybe you could craft and do that at the same time.
Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe.
What I was getting at with Cube, Swazi had mentioned being able to access Cube from the starter city. Another thing is you have to be able to sell the I think they've said you can sell the blueprints. So you have to be able to sell the blueprint somewhere, and that's kind of a weird thing to sell in a normal market. So they could possibly have like a blueprint market in the starter city, and that's where you would go to review all the blueprints and everything as well. And going on the market side of things, the selling and buying, one thing the starter city could do is be focused more on central communication. In the I think we've done 2 market episodes now, but in those market episodes we've talked about the difficulty in communicating, what someone is selling where, because you can potentially sell it in these keeps all over the place. There could maybe be some kind of, not an auction house, certainly, because they've said there's not going to be an auction house, but maybe some kind of an announcement board so that they don't have to necessarily have like trade chat, spam stuff all the time, which I still think people will do anyway, but that's besides the point. We've had that argument. But maybe they can have some kind of a board that says like, okay, such and such just put this up for sale on this town, and it'll tell you where it is and who to talk to, but that's it, and then you have to go talk to them and go.
No, a bit like Eve.
Yeah, except you can't buy it and order it.
Except you can buy it. Yeah, you have to go there to buy it. Yeah,
Eve, you can buy it and have it shipped to you and everything. But
I do kind of like the idea of the trade chat over that, though. The act of speaking or having to type to someone to say, "Hey, I want to buy that." Adding all these other, even partially automated systems is giving the opportunity for everyone to be too lazy.
That's true. That's why my interest in it is really, as much as I would like for people to have markets and stuff in the remote cities, I would actually kind of rather see people have to do individual trade, but they can post things. So you can post it and say, I'm selling this, but then someone still has to talk to you and ask you for it and everything. But
I'll be standing by the fountain.
It's more of a notice board than anything.
But the other thought with that is we know there's going to be bounties, and having, in my opinion, having bounties posted separately in all kinds of different towns isn't going to work very well.
No, it has to be posted. In the central city.
The central city as the bounty posting
building.
The sheriff building.
Yeah. They could have a bounty crier who's been given all the bounties, and he just sits there and goes, "We have a bounty on blah blah blah." When you talk to him, and I don't know. Infix said the bazaar in Star Wars Galaxies, it just tells you where stuff is sold. Still need to go to people to buy it. So,
yeah.
Let's see. I did have something else, I think. Where am I at?
But another thing that they could do, they haven't confirmed, and it's probably going to depend on the number of subscribers, but GM events held.
That was my next
inside,
thing.
Inside the... I'm in your head, that's why. But yeah.
Server events.
GM events would bring a lot of people there, but not just the basic one we see now, but an actual huge event like, for example, a GM, just the king comes out. The king comes out and makes a speech or whatever, but an actual real event over a few hours would bring a lot of people back. Even if you're not an RPer, seeing those kind of things just makes it worth the trip.
And there are some occasional things they can do like that even if they're automated, still add interesting atmosphere to a place and make people want to come back. Like I remember in WoW, I think it was the Blood Elf main city that I can't remember the name of right now. Silvermoon, thank you. They had the Elite Taurian chieftains would occasionally do like a concert or something and play in there, and I would occasionally just go watch it because I thought it was cool, and so I just go hang out and watch that and be like, this is a cool thing to have. It's totally automated, and it happened regularly on the same time every day, but
sure.
They could also it would make sense to me that would be a central location for most of the seasonal events too, because the PvP zones, it's kind of hard to do somewhat frivolous sort of activities. They could certainly still do some things out there that are a part of it, but I would think probably the hub for that is going to be the starter city. Yeah,
because for most games, the seasonal events are communicated through and shown through environment in our NPCs, which you won't have in the general world. Because with the changing of the landmark and of the landscape by who owns the island, is going to nullify any effect you would try to have for seasonal events. So the only real hub where you can do that, it's the starter city.
Now, what are your guys' thoughts on the starter city being either an end point or the beginning point to a caravan route?
Well, I think that's going to be that's
going to be there.
Yeah, I think that
would affect the overall kind of more
the NPC operated caravans are going to probably start from the Star City. Yeah,
I don't think they should necessarily have to, though. I mean, if you're going from one keep to the next keep, maybe there can be like a building upgrade that allows them to do caravans too.
Yeah.
But by default, I think probably most a lot of caravans are gonna start from the starter city
those are kind of like mini events almost, where there's a caravan leaving the city. Anyone who's in the city, has that opportunity to be like, let's go guard that.
Let's go score it, because there's going to be opportunities for PvP.
And then once you're back to the starter city, you might as well do other things, hang out. One thing I had two more things, but one of them, actually no, you already brought up server events, so I have only one more thing left, which is more of a possibility, I guess, because I definitely don't think CSE has ever said that they were going to do this, but they certainly have a lot of the technology in the game to do it, which is player housing. If they were to allow any form of player housing and set that up as a system, I could see the starter city being the most feasible place. I mean, we know people can build out in the PvP area, but I'm not talking keeps. I'm not talking battlements. I'm not talking
houses,
guilds. I'm talking small living spaces that people can go and hang out in.
Safe zone houses.
Yeah, and as you said, you thought that they were allowing some of the first backers to do inns inside the starter cities. Now, certainly, I think any player housing is probably going to be like instanced or something, because they don't want to live in the starter city with tons of houses.
And it's going to be way down the road, I think, because you can build your own home directly in the world. So
well,
it's
you can, but
it's
can
probably
you?
going to be
Can
far
you?
from a priority.
Are you individually going to have enough resources that you can build your own house by yourself?
You have the
Well,
possibility. It's
he
going to
will.
take you
I will.
forever. If
Possibility,
you're not...
but can you actually do it and no one just walks up and sets a torch to it? That's the problem.
Depends on where.
You can do it. They can
Yeah.
destroy it at the same time, but you can do it.
Yeah,
So I don't think it's a priority. But one of the things, again, on crafting, since we were talking about shops and stores for the crafters, basically, just like any centralized power, the higher your honor or your recognition from the realm as a crafter, the closer you can be from the castle, from the center of power. So the very high-end crafters, the very skilled ones, creating the most powerful items, could be found the closest to the castle, closer to the throne. So it brings people from the outside, the ones who want that epic weapon, the one who wants Excalibur done. They know they can go in that place and look at the shops the closest to the main square, for example, or to the throne, basically, where you will have the most advanced crafters.
Yeah, and kind of going with that too. You brought up crafting and buying supplies or whatever. If crafting has generic supplies that you don't craft, a lot of MMOs have generic things that you have to. They're like sub
consumables and things like that.
Supplies, yeah. No, you have to have a place to buy them. That could be the only place to buy them.
Where you have NPCs to buy them, yeah.
Right. Maybe everything will be player made, like literally everything, which would be cool. But
even then, for example, you don't have to sell everything at your own store. You could have a merchant, for example, if for the arrows, which you will have to craft in huge quantities, you can have an NPC where you drop your arrows there. You pay a bit of a fee to have them listed there, and somebody can go to that NPC to grab 2,000 arrows. I don't know, but they don't have to look for those convenience items that are consumables and that will need a huge amount of. You would need to have that in a centralized area rather than people having to run from shop to shop to get their arrows and their potions and their healing stones and things like that.
Yeah, possibility.
All right. Anybody have anything else? New thoughts, possible choices they can make that might draw some actual interest into the starter cities beyond what we've already kind of gone over?
Well, I don't want what I'm thinking to be just a kind of let's go to the city, refill, and come back. But I like the idea of the city offering some sort of buffs that, once you're in the city, kind of similar to how they handle resting in a lot of MMOs where you're in a safe zone, you rest.
Yeah.
You gain a bonus to XP. In this case, you're in the city, say you died or you haven't died, your buffs have just run out. And I'm not talking about the buffs that the minstrel might give you, but just generic buffs like places of power that you've taken that now grant your faction kind of buffs, but you have to go to the city first to receive them because that's where they're kind of located. And once you're in the city, you get the buff. You can go back out, but at least it's bringing people to the place.
Let's be honest. There's not gonna be a lot of things that actually keep people in the starter city, but there are possibilities for enough interest to bring them back regularly, even if for a short time.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna come back to the buffs because I think that segues into our last discussion topic pretty well. Swazi mentioned something that I do actually think is pretty feasible: claiming the rewards from your king. We know that the king only gives you rewards every day at the end of the day when the server resets. And my first thought is, well, that's kind of annoying. You can't get your rewards instantly, but you're not going to be able to buy them or use them until you sell at least the material rewards, the money and the mats you might get or whatever. You're not going to really be able to use those until you go get a crafter anyway. So it kind of makes sense that you could maybe have to return to get those, because you could stockpile them until for a week or however long until you go get them, and then you want to get new armor.
Right.
You have to be in the city to use them. You might as well pick them up in the city.
In the city, yeah.
Yeah. Now, back to Brand's point, I can say I don't really like the idea of using buffs to bring people back, because I feel like at least for me personally, it brings me into the next and final topic, which is, what are things you do not want CSE to do to bring people into the starter city? And my number one thing is, I really don't want them to do things that force us to go back.
Yeah. I would say that's the same for me.
You've got to train a new skill. You have to go back to the starter area. Now I'm just pissed off because I had to walk to the starter area. You want your weekly buffs. You have to walk back to the starter area to go get them. Otherwise, you're not going to have them.
I think a buff might fall in a gray area in that idea. In that,
possibly,
my opinion, buffs are great. You go into a raid, PvE raid. There's not going to really be that in here, but most people require you to be fully buffed out, fully everything, because that's part of what makes you excel. I don't believe in the PvP realm that buffs have as much value as they
depends
do
on how
other
they're made.
things, depending on how what they are, obviously. But I don't think a buff is a game-breaking thing where it's going to be a forced thing to be like, oh, if you're that type of person who really wants it, I'm going to go back and get it. You could not care and be like, okay, well, it's there. And maybe it's not just you go back and you're buff, but you have to, it's part of the PvP system. You have to control certain things, or you have to have found certain places of power and still control them, that kind of thing, where it's constantly in and out. At one point, it's not there, and there's no reason to go back, and another point's, hey, let's go get this buff.
One thing we did talk about that I think could actually work with that a little bit is one thing we talked about in a different episode was the idea that maybe the closer you are to your starter city, you get some kind of a buff, so that it's harder for people to come into your deep into your back line and fight you, because you've got kind of some smaller buffs and everything that help you fight a little bit better.
Support,
You've got a rally, an emotional
realm
buff.
Support,
But that could possibly be something like that as well. Like maybe you go back to the starter city, you get a buff that only lasts like an hour. It's not going to be like something like that. I think I would be more okay with, because then
not
it's
a daily buff. But,
it's not going to be something that you're going to be able to carry with you through all the rest of the day. It's only going to last until maybe your next battle, and then you're pretty much done with. Other buffs, for me, I'm not hugely against it. I think it is kind of a gray area as to whether or not I would like it. I guess it kind of depends on how the buffs worked, how they were gained. If they were from the relics and stuff and the places of power, I might be okay with that. But then it's kind of annoying that I have to go all the way back to get it. But on the other hand, that would make it very difficult to continue campaigns really deep into enemy territory.
Yeah.
So that could be kind
of
I
would have to agree with you that I really don't want them to force you to go back to the Star City for anything essential.
I think the buffs, if the buffs have a purpose other than forcing you to come back, then that can be okay.
Yeah.
If they put them there just to force you back, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Like I said, I wasn't quite so sure on it myself, but I like the concept of the city granting you a bonus of some sort that you can only claim there.
Now, anybody have any other things that they really, really don't want them to do to bring people back to the central area?
It's hard.
There's not a lot of things that they can do that really be bad for the whole game and for the Star City, or that I would not want to see.
Every time you die, you respawn in the Star City.
I don't want that. I was just about to say that. I don't want it.
Yeah, no. Well, if you're close to it, yeah. But if you're fighting on the front lines and then you have to go all the way back, depends on the travel time, but even then, I think if it takes you 45 minutes to go back to the fight every time you die,
I want it to be a risk, but I definitely don't want it to be something I have to do every time I die.
Yeah.
It's not a risk. That's a.
At this point, that's
I'll log on
uncertainty.
tomorrow. See you guys later.
Yeah, pretty much. You die, you just log off.
Yeah, there aren't. To me, honestly, there aren't that many kind of things that like.
Yeah,
Some
that
of
are
the
big
things are
no.
maybe minor inconveniences, but it's like, yeah, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I can live without. Yeah.
Yeah. Big no-nos. The dying thing is the only one.
It's probably that and forcing you to go back for things like your skills and everything. You should be able to get them much more easily.
Which it's like almost XP based, really. Your skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they grow with you.
Yeah.
So.
Mark said he's hoping that this sort of stuff gets done organically. And one thing I could see that made me think of is I could see some of the players' content bringing people back. By that I mean, players doing certain events. Certainly, you want to do a lot in the PvP area. But yeah, I mean, if you can customize music, you maybe do a concert in the safe zone.
All the minstrels get together.
Role players can certainly bring the RPers back to the safe zone for doing things, even though they can RP in both places, PvP and safe zones. Of course, as I pointed out elsewhere, if there's an RP server, that's going to not necessarily help a lot in most other servers. Yeah. But, it could. Player events aren't like a super frequent thing, but depending on the game, and the features we have, some people do those.
Depending on the drive of the players to do some RP, you can
and the size of the server.
Events. Yeah. It's going to be it's not going to be a guild thing. It's going to be a realm thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
For the player events.
Would this fall under your guys' don't want or acceptable to be, a thing every now and then is for the safe zone to become not safe? Mm-hmm. Meaning we could attack another faction city every blue moon or so.
I would honestly, just for the game's PvP, like the option to
as an event
to attack the safe zone. But on the other hand, there does need to be a safe zone for people to be safe in. I think maybe a compromise that I think would be cool is if it would be possible to bombard the safe zone, not to go in and kill people, but maybe like if you did happen to push that far with siege, you could bombard it and actually maybe temporarily destroy buildings or something, and then people or the walls and set things on fire, and then people be like, "Oh God, we're being attacked," but you couldn't actually go in and kill them because it is supposed to be a safe zone. So you could do damage or something just to be able to say like, "Haha, we set your city on fire." Yeah,
I like Mark's idea and vision of it, which is players found a city where it makes the most sense, and people go there because that's the best place to go. It might be. We've talked a lot about the Star City as trying to keep it alive and keep people coming back, but at the same time, it's not like in PvE where the Star City doesn't have anything to offer. In this one, you can go wherever you want and wherever the game takes you and your gameplay takes you. If the Star City becomes useless, because I don't think it's gonna ever happen, because I don't see a realm dominating so much that the front lines are almost at the other two safe islands. But but founding a city that becomes a guild, founding a city that becomes the new hub and the new Star City, for me would be even better than trying by brute force or enticing players to go back to the Star City. Making this one the hub by the players. That's the definition of a sandbox game, where the players decided that this was a better area to have a city in there. And they make this one, people move and migrate towards that city, making it even safer because there's a lot more people constantly, so it's harder to attack. And if the starter city is left less populated, because this one is much more convenient and was player created, I think it's a good thing for it's a good thing for the health of the game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stems from other systems and how they work, or a lot of that will be dependent on other systems and how they work. If travel time is a thing, if there is a big chunk of travel time, people are going to want to make, forward camps and bases that are much closer to the main front lines of where they're trying to attack the new islands and things like that. And in those cases, those will be the new kind of go-to hubs. And I'm sure the permissions for building things will be set in a way where other people can join in to help, or at least participate in being there, and they're not like locked out of, oh, hey, this guild built this, so all you guilds, you can't come in our base because you didn't build this. I'm sure there will be some sort of permission setting that allow that to be an actual true city where all of that faction can come in and participate.
Yeah, I think that all really goes back to the first part of the conversation we had, which is the existing systems that do kind of foster this. Specifically not having new PvE leveling areas, not having other things that drain the population away, and having it be a safe area for trade, at least for the foreseeable future after post-launch. I doubt within the first 6 months you're going to have a truly safe player-built city in a realm that people can congregate around. So the starter city is still going to be relevant at the very least for secure trade. Maybe later on in the game, players will be able to build a truly safe city that they could feel confident doing trade, and then maybe everything will migrate to that location. But that'll just I think that kind of depends and grows from some of the dynamic systems that are already in the game.
Yeah, and kind of expanding on what Mark is saying, he's talking about smaller cities as you get closer and closer to dangerous areas.
Definitely.
That makes sense because players start become a little more fearful of throwing all their material out to build these giant things when they know that in a matter of minutes they could probably be overrun and all of their efforts are wasted. So it really becomes this, or like he was talking about earlier, the organicness of it, this player-driven effort where you have multiple guilds trying to defend a group of crafters trying to build this huge place of a safe zone,
And if a realm starts dominating in an area, the city might grow and they might build a city much farther than the other realms, and that becomes a safe zone because it's becoming a hub, and then there's always a lot of people there, so it's harder for the other realms to attack it unless they band together, maybe coordinated attacks or things like that.
Well, and one good thing is those cities like that, when someone does build a relatively safe city, or they start to, that immediately becomes a PvP
people will
target.
Flock to that.
Because, people will flock to it, but it immediately becomes a PvP target for the other realms because they look at that big city going up and they're like, I want to burn it.
You're not allowed to build a city over there.
And
that city's bigger than ours. It has to go.
Yeah. It could theoretically swap hands a number of times and start becoming a hub for other factions, and then it becomes a target on our side. Like, hey, that was ours, and not only does that city exist and we don't like it, it used to be ours, so screw you.
We're going to take it back. Because that's also the thing, we keep talking about taking keeps and destroying them. The most economically viable things to do is taking the keep with the least amount of damage that you can repair them, because you have less resources to pull to basically rebuild it. So if you can take the city and keep it without having to rebuild it completely, you save a huge amount of time and even more resources.
Yeah, I think the main place you're going to see people burning keeps is in the smaller keeps on the front line, and that's one of the reasons why you wouldn't want to build a really big keep on the front line, because you're trying to pour resources in it, and someone's going to come down and burn it down before you finish, most likely. So you build smaller keeps to help you defend it, and maybe if you win and you succeed, you come in later and reinforce it, make it bigger as you push the front line out. But I think that's where you'll see people actually burning things, because if I conquer a keep and I know that my realm probably can't hold it, then yeah, I'm probably going to start burning it. I'm going to be like, no, just rack it. Steal whatever you can that's not nailed down, and we're tearing this place apart.
It. As long as you have the upper end, just deconstruct it, save the resources, take the resources for yourself.
We'll build up walls of the dead.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day or the end of the year after the game releases, that once it does become more organic, you'll see these phases where the starter city, the real one, goes through these phases of popular and unpopular and popular and unpopular, depending on how the islands are shifting and how the tide of war is happening.
Awesome.
I think, and that's like that in real life, really. When you're at war, the most active area is closer to the front lines. So if your front lines move back, you'll go to the main hub that is the closest to the front lines, and then if your realm is not doing very well, that might be your starter city.
Yeah. All right. I think we've had a pretty good and productive conversation. Thank you, chat, for contributing questions. Thank you, Mark, for dropping by and giving us some good perspective on things. And, of course, thank you, Kriss and Brand. I do want to thank everybody for coming out, and everyone that does watch this video. We will have another episode in 2 weeks. Saturday the 21st at 6:30 PM EST. Until then, have a good night.
Have a good one.